The moment Prince Harry stepped into Meghan's private wardrobe, he had no idea that his entire perception of love, loyalty, and trust was about to be shattered. He thought he knew her. He thought he understood her ambitions, her dreams, even her fears. But what he was about to uncover wasn't just a secret. It was a revelation so explosive it could rewrite everything he believed about their life together. What if the woman you devoted your heart to had been planning to walk away before you even said, "I do"? What if the love you thought was mutual was, at some level, a calculated strategy? That question haunted Harry in those first seconds of hesitation, standing frozen before the neatly aligned coats, the elegant gowns, and the polished shoes that all seemed innocuous, harmless. And then, tucked behind a row of designer dresses, hidden in a compartment he hadn't noticed before, his eyes fell on it. A leather-bound journal, aged yet meticulously preserved, almost as if it had been waiting for him to find it. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Harry's heartbeat accelerated. He could feel it in his chest, a mix of fear, dread, and an insistent curiosity that demanded he open it. He wasn't just opening a book. He was about to open a Pandora's box. The first page he flipped to bore a date that made his stomach drop. Months before their wedding, Meghan had already pinned detailed notes about her exit strategy from royal life. The handwriting was unmistakable, deliberate, almost clinical. Stay long enough to build the brand. Then go. That one sentence, so casual in its brevity, hit Harry like a sledgehammer. It wasn't a diary entry born from whimsy or idle reflection. It was a plan, and it was terrifying in its clarity. But what did that really mean? Harry had spent months, perhaps even years, believing in a narrative carefully curated in public. A fairy tale romance, the kind of love story the world admired. Yet here was evidence that behind the smiles, the red carpet appearances, and the carefully photographed moments, a parallel story had been unfolding, a story he had only just discovered. He flipped the page, his hands trembling slightly, reading, Step 1, become global. Step 2, break free. Step 3, build empire. Every word was precise, every step intentional. It wasn't just about leaving the royal family quietly. It was about crafting a personal brand, establishing leverage, and positioning herself for a life beyond the crown. Each word was a revelation, a betrayal, and a key to understanding a series of actions that had puzzled him for months. Harry could hardly believe what he was seeing. Questions flooded his mind at a dizzying pace. How long had she been planning this? Did she ever love him? Was he merely a part of her strategic plan? And yet, the entries were candid. There was no ambiguity. The dates aligned perfectly with their engagement period, meaning Meghan had been thinking about leaving before the wedding day itself. The implications were staggering. He had walked down the aisle with a heart full of devotion, and in her private thoughts, she had already mapped out a path to independence without him. For anyone else, these revelations might have been mere curiosity, an odd insight into someone's private life. But for Harry, it felt like a personal earthquake. Every conversation, every shared moment, every intimate exchange he could recall seemed to flicker under the harsh light of scrutiny. Had he been naive? Had he been blind? And worse, what if the public, who adored their love story, had been watching a carefully staged narrative while he was caught off guard by the reality behind the scenes? He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to steady his racing thoughts. He had to understand the full scope before he reacted. Every instinct screamed at him that what he was holding in his hands could change not only his life, but the very fabric of his marriage. But the journal wasn't merely a list of steps or ambitions. As Harry turned each page, the entries began to reveal something more unsettling. There were details about timing, public appearances, and even subtle manipulation of media narratives. Meghan had mapped out her trajectory in a way that was both strategic and chillingly methodical. There were reflections about her image, careful observations of royal family dynamics, and notes that suggested she had been testing the waters, gauging reactions, and planning contingencies. Every line was a mix of ambition and calculation, and every paragraph underscored a growing tension. Harry had believed in love, but these pages revealed an agenda far beyond what he had imagined. The diary entries also hinted at the emotional toll these plans took on Harry, though unknowingly. There were observations about his behavior, his expectations, and his vulnerabilities. She wrote about understanding his attachment to family, his loyalty to tradition, and even his empathy towards causes he cared about. Each observation was paired with tactical notes, how to maintain his support while gradually carving a path to her own independence. The precision of it all was unnerving. Harry had always known Meghan was ambitious, confident, and determined. But ambition is one thing. Calculated premeditation that affects another person's life is quite another. And this wasn't merely about her career. This was about their lives together. Harry's mind spiraled. Was he shocked, betrayed, or both? Perhaps he was feeling something more complex, a mixture of admiration for her cunning and horror at its application. He recalled moments in the months leading up to the wedding, the late-night discussions, the shared plans for charitable work, the public smiles for the cameras, and he began to see them in a new, unsettling light. Could it be that some of those moments were influenced, at least in part, by her hidden agenda? Could the love, the connection, the laughter they shared have been intertwined with strategy? He couldn't answer these questions yet. All he knew was that he needed to uncover the full story before making any decisions, before letting this knowledge dictate his emotions. And yet, even in the midst of shock, Harry felt a pull towards understanding. He needed to piece together the puzzle, to follow the breadcrumbs that Meghan had unintentionally, or perhaps intentionally, left behind. As he continued to read, he found entries that were more personal, more revealing. They weren't just about steps and strategy. They were about vision, control, and influence. She wrote about her future brand, her philanthropic endeavors, and the type of influence she wanted to wield. But intertwined with this vision were references to Harry's potential reactions, his loyalty, and even his naivete. Every note, every observation, built a narrative of premeditated independence that left Harry questioning everything. The emotional weight of the discovery was almost unbearable. His thoughts raced between disbelief and a sense of inevitability. How could he have missed the signs? The late-night phone calls, the sudden trips, the cryptic comments. Had they all been part of a larger plan he was blind to? And now, holding the leather-bound journal in his hands, the realization settled in. He had been living in a carefully constructed illusion. This wasn't simply a diary. It was a roadmap, a blueprint that revealed intentions he never suspected and decisions made without him. And yet, the very act of reading it gave him clarity, a window into Meghan's mind that he had never had before. But even as the shock threatened to overwhelm him, Harry felt a sense of urgency. He needed to know more. The entries hinted at further revelations, hidden insights, and possibly actions that could have already set their plan into motion. Every page promised to unravel more of the story, to peel back layers of intention, desire, and calculation. He could feel the tension in his chest, the tightness of adrenaline mixed with dread. What he was holding could redefine their relationship, challenge his assumptions, and alter the trajectory of both their lives. And so, with a deep breath, Harry turned another page, bracing himself for what would come next, aware that the journey he was about to embark on would be far more shocking than he had ever imagined. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Harry couldn't shake the image of that leather-bound journal from his mind. The smell of old ink, the precise handwriting, the chilling clarity of each plan, it haunted him. But before confronting Meghan or revealing what he had discovered, he needed time to think, time to understand. And that's when the first threads of suspicion began to weave themselves into his daily life. He started noticing things he had once overlooked, subtle signs that now seemed glaringly obvious in the harsh light of revelation. It began with small inconsistencies. A glance here, a whispered comment there, a delayed response to a seemingly innocent question. At the time, he dismissed them as the quirks of a busy fiancé navigating the pressures of royal life. But now, with the journal in his mind, everything felt loaded with meaning. Why did she schedule certain meetings alone? Why did she insist on particular outfits, arrangements, or public appearances that seemed calculated rather than spontaneous? Harry replayed their past interactions in his mind, and what he once interpreted as charm now carried undertones of strategy. Each memory was a puzzle piece, but when put together, the picture was unsettling. He started asking himself questions he had avoided before. Was she truly invested in their relationship? Or had she seen him as a necessary part of her plan? A partner in public, a stepping stone in private? Harry felt a knot tighten in his chest. Could it be that his love had been genuine, while hers had been transactional? The thought was unbearable. It gnawed at him, a persistent whisper that refused to be silenced. And yet, Harry couldn't ignore the conflicting emotions coursing through him. He remembered moments of genuine affection, shared laughter, tender gestures, quiet conversations at night. Those memories felt real, visceral, almost sacred. Could someone orchestrate such intimacy purely as a strategy? Could love and calculated ambition coexist? Or was he fooling himself, clinging to illusions to protect his own heart? These questions left him restless, turning over every encounter in his mind, searching for hidden motives that may or may not exist. The tension bled into daily life. Harry found himself hyper-aware of her movements, every word she spoke, every glance she gave. It was as if he was observing her from the outside, scrutinizing behaviors he had once taken at face value. Was that smile genuine, or was it carefully crafted for effect? Was that offhand remark innocent, or a subtle test? The paranoia grew, fueled not just by the journal, but by the slow accumulation of small, seemingly trivial actions that now appeared loaded with meaning. He started confiding, cautiously, in those closest to him. Friends noticed a change, the way he spoke in cryptic tones, his tendency to analyze conversations obsessively. They didn't know the journal yet, of course, but they could sense that something had shifted. Harry felt isolated. He was caught between protecting his emotions and uncovering the full truth. Every piece of advice he received, every friendly gesture, felt like it might be filtered through some unseen lens. Could he trust anyone? Could anyone truly understand the storm brewing inside him? And then there were contradictions. Publicly, Meghan continued to display warmth, charm, and devotion. Her smile remained impeccable, her gestures perfect. She seemed engaged, loving, committed. Yet privately, or at least through the lens of his suspicion, he saw subtle cues that hinted at detachment, careful planning, and a strategic mind operating behind the scenes. The dichotomy was maddening. How could the woman he adored appear so authentic while simultaneously plotting a trajectory that might leave him behind? Harry questioned his own judgment. Had he been blind? Or had he simply wanted to believe in the story he wanted to see? Even the smallest incidents now carried weight. A late-night call from a friend of Meghan's. A cryptic note left for staff. A sudden change in schedule. Each one was innocent on its own, but in combination, they became data points in a pattern he couldn't ignore. Harry began cataloging these moments mentally, piecing them together as if assembling a detective's case file. Every detail mattered. Every nuance carried potential significance. And the more he observed, the more convinced he became that the journal's contents were not isolated fantasies. They were grounded in reality, influencing actions he had once interpreted as spontaneous. His sleep became restless. Nights were filled with replaying conversations, examining facial expressions in memory, scrutinizing every gesture, every glance. He began asking himself questions he never thought he'd ask. Was she planning to leave even before the wedding? Did she truly care about the family they were about to start? Was he merely a participant in a narrative written long before he ever walked into her life? Each question gnawed at him, feeding an anxiety that was impossible to quell. Harry's paranoia was compounded by a sense of inevitability. The journal had revealed intentions, but intentions require action. He realized that if Meghan had truly been planning her exit, she might already have set events in motion that he couldn't yet see. Contracts, conversations, alliances, media strategies, all could be quietly unfolding without his knowledge. He felt simultaneously helpless and determined. Helpless because the situation was larger than any confrontation could immediately fix. Determined because knowledge gave him power. If he could understand the full scope, he might anticipate her moves, protect himself, and reclaim agency in a situation that felt increasingly beyond his control. And yet, amid the tension and rising suspicion, there was a dangerous allure to the uncertainty. Every new detail, every minor observation became a clue in a puzzle that both terrified and fascinated him. Could he piece together the timeline of her plan? Could he decode the intentions behind public appearances, media interactions, and personal gestures? The detective in him, an instinct he had long relied upon in his charitable work and personal relationships, awakened fully. He began to map out the connections between journal entries, private observations, and public behaviors. Each connection intensified the complexity, revealing layers he hadn't anticipated. Audience, ask yourself, if someone you loved had secrets this intricate, would you look the other way, or would you demand the truth? How far would you go to uncover intentions hidden in plain sight? For Harry, there was no turning back. Each revelation, each discovery, demanded action. And action, he realized, might come sooner than he expected. As the days passed, the suspicion became almost a physical presence. It shadowed him during meetings, hovered over conversations, and lingered in every quiet moment. He began noticing patterns he had missed before. The way Meghan's schedule was always tightly controlled, the subtle steering of conversations toward topics of image, influence, and perception. Every interaction, every exchange, became a test of awareness, a measure of how much of their relationship was genuine and how much was calculated. He started questioning himself too. Was he reading too much into the signs, or had he been blind for too long? Could love be this complicated, so intertwined with ambition and strategy that the lines between genuine affection and tactical interaction became nearly impossible to distinguish? These reflections kept him awake at night, and yet they also propelled him forward, urging him to uncover more, understand deeper, and see the full picture before making any choices that could alter the course of their lives. The tension escalated when he realized that even small missteps in his observations could mislead him. Every conversation could be misinterpreted. Every gesture could be a red herring. He had to be meticulous. Every detail mattered. And in this heightened state of awareness, Harry began to prepare. Not yet to confront, not yet to act, but to observe, record, and analyze. Each subtle sign, each minor inconsistency became data points in a growing web of potential truths. And then one night, as he reviewed his mental notes, he realized the full scope of what he was dealing with. The suspicion wasn't just about minor actions or fleeting behaviors. It was about a meticulously constructed plan, executed with precision, aimed at a future that might not include him in the way he had imagined. The journal had given him a glimpse, but observation would reveal the reality. And reality, he feared, could be far more shocking than anything the pages had suggested. Harry knew he had to prepare for the moment when the truth could no longer remain hidden. He had to steel himself for confrontation, for revelation, and perhaps for heartbreak of a magnitude he had never experienced. And yet, even in that tense anticipation, a thought persisted. Could he trust what he saw? Could he trust his own instincts after so much love, so much devotion, and so much hope invested in this relationship? The uncertainty was unbearable, but it was also unavoidable. He resolved to dig deeper, to watch closely, to uncover every subtle cue and hidden sign. And that's when he noticed it, the first unmistakable clue that Meghan's actions were more deliberate than he had feared. A small, seemingly trivial detail, overlooked by most, but in Harry's mind, a glaring confirmation. It was subtle, almost invisible to anyone else, but to him, it shouted volumes. And just as he realized the implications of this first clue, a new, even more disturbing discovery was about to surface. Something so personal, so unexpected, that it would force Harry to confront a reality he wasn't ready for. The suspicion had built, the patterns were forming, and the first unmistakable signs of a carefully laid plan were emerging. But what Harry was about to uncover next would shake him to his very core, and nothing in his life would ever be the same again. Harry had already felt the tremor of suspicion coursing through him, but nothing could have prepared him for what happened next. A hidden compartment, a leather-bound journal, and the unnerving realization that every instinct he'd trusted about love and loyalty was now under a microscope. He approached the wardrobe again, this time with a sense of purpose and dread intertwined. Every detail mattered. The way the coats hung slightly off-kilter, the faint scuff on the wooden floor beneath, the subtle indentation on the shelf that suggested something had been moved, hidden, or deliberately concealed. It wasn't just curiosity that propelled him forward, it was necessity. He had to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. His hand trembled as it brushed against the hidden flap. A barely perceptible seam gave way, revealing the leather journal he had glimpsed days earlier. The craftsmanship was exquisite, soft, supple leather, bound with meticulous care, the edges slightly worn from handling. There was an almost ritualistic quality to it, as if this wasn't meant to be discovered, yet it was preserved with precision. Harry's pulse quickened. The weight of the book felt heavier than it should, laden with secrets that could unravel the narrative of their life together. He opened it slowly, turning the first few pages with caution. The entries were dated, precise, almost surgical in their detail. The handwriting, elegant, confident, deliberate, revealed not just thoughts, but a carefully plotted roadmap. Step 1, become global. Step 2, break free. Step 3, build empire. Each line, each word, confirmed the fears that had been whispering in Harry's mind. This wasn't a diary of fleeting musings or casual reflection. This was a plan, and the dates confirmed it. This plan had been formulated long before they had walked down the aisle. The first entry he read was almost clinical in its detachment. Meghan had outlined specific goals, each accompanied by projected timelines and potential obstacles. There were notes on media strategy, charitable engagements, and how each public appearance could serve to bolster her personal brand. Even the phrasing was deliberate. Maintain alliance, leverage exposure, maximize perception. Harry's stomach churned. This was not love in its rawest form. This was strategy. Carefully measured, meticulously executed strategy. And yet, amid the strategic planning, there were personal observations that cut the deepest. Notes on Harry himself. References to his behavior, his loyalty, his trust, even his vulnerabilities. She had mapped him in ink on paper, not as a partner, but as a variable in her calculations. Harry could feel the weight of each observation, each note, like a physical blow. He had thought he knew her, thought he had seen the entirety of her character. Now he realized he had been only one observer of a story that had always been hers to write. He flipped further into the journal, discovering pages dedicated entirely to timing and execution. The entries outlined when certain public appearances should occur, how interactions with the royal family should be managed, and how Harry's own reputation could be harnessed to facilitate her trajectory. Each paragraph was a mix of ambition and manipulation. It wasn't merely a plan to leave. It was a plan to ascend, strategically and deliberately, using the elements around her, Harry included, as instruments of her design. Harry paused, letting the magnitude of it settle in. Could someone plan so precisely while maintaining a facade of affection and intimacy? Could love coexist with this level of premeditated calculation? The answers eluded him, but the evidence in his hands left little room for doubt. He was not dealing with casual ambition. He was dealing with foresight, strategy, and execution of a plan that positioned him as a component, not a priority. He read a passage that made his heart sink. Maintain engagement. Secure position. Project warmth and authenticity. Use partnership for leverage, not attachment. Harry's hands shook. The words were not ambiguous. They were direct, deliberate, almost cold in their clarity. Every smile he had shared, every intimate conversation, every public declaration now felt filtered through this lens. Had he been performing a role he didn't even realize? Was he merely a supporting character in a story he thought was his own? And yet, as unsettling as it was, Harry couldn't help but analyze the brilliance of it. Meghan had thought of everything. The optics, the timing, the leverage. The attention to detail was extraordinary, almost genius. But the genius cut two ways. Admiration twisted into heartbreak. Respect collided with betrayal. The line between strategic brilliance and personal deceit blurred until Harry couldn't tell one from the other. The journal didn't stop at professional ambitions. There were reflections on personal freedom, autonomy, and self-preservation. Pages were dedicated to psychological observations, not just of Harry, but of family members, aides, and the broader network surrounding them. Each note carefully considered human behavior, predicting reactions, anticipating resistance, and crafting contingencies. It was methodical, exhaustive, and chillingly thorough. Harry realized the stakes were higher than he had imagined. This wasn't just about leaving the royal family or building a brand. This was about control, influence, a recalibration of the balance of power, subtly but decisively shifting elements in her favor while maintaining an appearance of partnership and affection. The magnitude of it left him reeling. He had thought their relationship was defined by trust and love. Now he understood it was intertwined with strategy, observation, and calculated action. And as he absorbed the revelations, a new layer emerged. Hidden references, almost like coded notes, suggested that some actions had already been set in motion. Strategic communications, media placements, subtle financial maneuvers, steps that could potentially change the trajectory of their lives even before the confrontation had begun. Harry's mind raced. If these moves were active, how much time did he have to intervene? And more importantly, could he intervene without exposing himself to vulnerability or risk? Every instinct screamed at him to stop, to close the journal, to deny the reality confronting him. But the pull of curiosity was stronger. He needed to see the full extent, to uncover every page, every note, every hint of intention. What else had been planned? What else was written in secrecy? Each revelation felt like peeling back a layer of reality, exposing truths that were more complex and unsettling than he had ever imagined. Audience, imagine finding a secret like this in your own life. How would you react? Would you confront the person immediately? Would you observe, analyze, and plan your response? Or would the shock paralyze you, leaving you to wrestle alone with betrayal and confusion? For Harry, there was no simple answer. He had to proceed carefully, understanding that every action, every choice, could have far-reaching consequences. And then came the moment that made his pulse stop. A page nearly hidden between two larger entries contained a note in Meghan's handwriting, a reflection so intimate it felt like a knife to his heart. He will think it's love. It will be leverage. The words were stark, unambiguous, and brutal in their honesty. Harry had never felt such a precise combination of admiration and heartbreak, respect and betrayal, all at once. The very woman he loved had articulated, in ink on paper, a perspective that positioned him as a tool, a vehicle, rather than a partner. And just as he began to digest the full weight of that revelation, his eyes caught another subtle entry, one that hinted at actions yet to be revealed, consequences yet to unfold, and plans that might extend far beyond the boundaries of their relationship. Harry realized that the journal was not just a record of past intentions. It was a roadmap for the future, one in which he might have an increasingly uncertain role. And that's when he noticed it. A series of dates, corresponding to upcoming events and public appearances, each annotated with cryptic notes that suggested preemptive moves in the media, strategic engagements, and even hints at controlling narratives. It was subtle, almost invisible to the casual observer, but Harry recognized it immediately as a sign that the plan was active, deliberate, and unfolding even as he read. The wardrobe, the journal, the hidden truths. It was all a puzzle now, a web of calculated moves and precise timing. Harry had uncovered the map, but the journey had only just begun. Each revelation led to another, each page another layer of strategy and intention. The stakes were higher than he had imagined. The emotional weight was heavier than he had ever carried. And the next discovery, hidden deeper in the journal, promised to push him even further into a realm where love, trust, and ambition collided in ways he could barely comprehend. And as he readied himself to turn that next page, Harry knew one thing with certainty. What he was about to uncover next would leave him speechless, and it would demand a decision that could change everything. Harry's hands were still trembling as he stared at the leather-bound journal. Every page he had turned so far had revealed a layer of Meghan he thought he knew, only to realize he had never truly seen her at all. But as he moved deeper into the entries, a pattern emerged, one that showed her ambitions had started long before their engagement, long before the wedding, long before the fairy tale everyone else had believed in. The first entries under the heading, Early Ambitions, were startlingly precise. They weren't the ramblings of a young woman dreaming out loud. They were strategic, deliberate, and almost eerily calculated. Meghan had mapped out a trajectory for herself, step by step, with a clear objective, to establish influence and independence while leveraging the royal family's power and visibility. She wrote about becoming a public figure, not merely through marriage, but through a calculated cultivation of her image, media presence, and global reach. Harry could feel a chill run down his spine. This wasn't the Meghan he thought he knew. This was a version of her who was already thinking years ahead, plotting moves that he hadn't even imagined. One entry detailed her intentions for global exposure. She had identified key media appearances, charitable events, and speaking opportunities that would not only enhance her public profile, but also establish credibility, authority, and influence. She had written about crafting a narrative that would make her indispensable, admired, and, ultimately, untouchable. Harry felt a sinking realization. Everything he had witnessed, the press tours, the speeches, the interviews, was not just public relations. It was the execution of a plan she had set in motion long before he had ever imagined marrying her. Even more unsettling were the personal observations interwoven with her ambitions. Meghan wrote about Harry himself, not in the affectionate, loving tone one might expect, but in a manner that analyzed his habits, his preferences, and his potential reactions. She considered his loyalty, his empathy, his predictable patterns, and even the way he handled conflict. Each note was a strategic observation, a calculation of how to use him as both an ally and a lever to achieve her broader goals. Harry's stomach nodded. He had always seen himself as a partner in love, but these pages painted a different picture. He was a participant in her grand design, knowingly or unknowingly providing the stage on which her ambitions could play out. The journal revealed even more. Meghan had been meticulously planning how to manage appearances with the royal family, carefully noting which events to attend, how to behave, and what impressions to leave. Her entries suggested an acute awareness of the optics surrounding every gesture, every smile, every interaction. Harry had always assumed their lives together were shaped by spontaneity, by shared moments and personal choices. Now, he realized that those moments had been filtered through a lens of ambition, a strategic eye that assessed each detail for its utility and impact. The level of foresight was staggering. She had anticipated potential obstacles, questions from the media, criticism from the press, scrutiny from the royal household, and had devised strategies to navigate them. There were even contingency plans for setbacks, suggestions for shifting narratives, and notes on how to maintain control over public perception. It wasn't just ambition. It was preparation, precision, and preemptive action. Harry felt the full weight of the revelation pressing on him. This was not impulsive behavior. It was a meticulously plotted trajectory, a roadmap for influence and independence, executed with remarkable foresight. And then came the entries that focused on timing. Entries that made Harry's heart pound with a mixture of shock and disbelief. Meghan had calculated when certain moves should occur in relation to key events in their relationship. There were notes about engagement announcements, wedding preparations, and public appearances that all suggested a timeline deliberately structured to maximize her visibility and leverage. Each entry was a blueprint, each date a calculated step toward a future she had envisioned long before their union. Harry struggled to reconcile these revelations with the love he thought they shared. Had he been so blind? Or had he simply wanted to believe in the narrative she presented? The journal also revealed an unexpected self-awareness, a reflection on personal growth, independence, and autonomy. Meghan had written about the importance of being seen, respected, and recognized for her own merits, not solely as a member of the royal family or as Harry's partner. She had identified specific skills, platforms, and opportunities that would allow her to step into the world on her own terms. While the ambition itself was admirable, the implications were deeply unsettling for Harry. Every step towards self-determination seemed to have been plotted with careful consideration of his presence, influence, and potential reactions. Audience, consider this. How would you feel if the person you trusted most had been planning a future without you, long before you even imagined committing to them? How would you reconcile admiration for their ambition with the pain of being a secondary character in their story? These were the questions Harry wrestled with as he continued reading, unable to put the journal down, unable to step back from the truth confronting him. The journal's entries weren't merely professional or strategic, they were profoundly personal. Meghan had articulated not just her ambitions, but her approach to relationships, her understanding of human behavior, and her perception of loyalty and love. Harry's feelings, his devotion, his expectations, all were acknowledged and analyzed, often with a tone that suggested calculation rather than empathy. He could see how carefully she had considered the impact of her choices on him, on the family, and on public perception. Each note revealed an acute awareness of cause and effect, of action and consequence, and how each element could be orchestrated to serve her long-term goals. As Harry turned another page, he encountered a particularly revealing passage. Love is not a limitation. It is a tool. Commitment is a framework, not a boundary. The perception of affection can be leveraged to achieve independence. The words were sharp, precise, and chilling. They articulated a philosophy that blended emotional manipulation with strategic foresight. Harry felt a pang of betrayal, but also a grudging recognition of its brilliance. The clarity of thought, the precision of planning, and the audacity of the vision were undeniable. Yet the emotional cost, to him, to their relationship, was incalculable. He paused, reflecting on the paradox. Could someone truly love and strategize at the same time? Could ambition coexist with intimacy? And if it could, was he capable of discerning the difference between genuine affection and carefully curated leverage? Harry's mind raced. Every memory, every conversation, every shared smile now demanded reinterpretation. Was he remembering love, or was he recalling calculated moments designed to further someone else's trajectory? And yet, amid the shock and confusion, there was a disturbing clarity. The journal had revealed that Meghan's ambitions had never been reactive or impulsive. They had been proactive, deliberate, and meticulously planned. Each step in their relationship, each decision, each engagement had been part of a broader strategy that he had only just begun to comprehend. The realization hit him like a wave. He had been navigating a world carefully constructed by someone else, and he had only just been handed the map. Harry felt a mixture of grief, anger, and awe. The early ambitions she had laid out weren't simply goals. They were a lens through which to view every interaction, every choice, every step they had taken together. He couldn't undo the past, but understanding it was critical. Every revelation sharpened his perception, heightened his awareness, and deepened the complexity of his emotional response. He was learning, piecing together a narrative that was at once brilliant, calculated, and deeply painful. As he read the final pages of this section, the journal hinted at even more ambitious maneuvers, plans that extended beyond the royal family, beyond their relationship, beyond anything Harry had anticipated. There were references to global influence, brand creation, and strategic autonomy that suggested a vision far larger than what he had imagined. Each note raised new questions. How much of what he had witnessed was authentic? How much was part of a broader scheme? And most importantly, what came next? Harry closed the journal for a moment, taking a deep breath. The early ambitions she had written weren't just dreams. They were actionable, precise, and remarkably forward-thinking. They revealed a mind that was calculating, strategic, and unflinching in its pursuit of independence. And yet, they also revealed a personal side, one intertwined with him in ways that were both intimate and painful. He felt the full weight of it: love and strategy, ambition and betrayal, intertwined in a tapestry more complex than he could have imagined. And then he realized something terrifying. These early ambitions weren't confined to the past. They were ongoing, evolving, and active. The plan was not complete. It was unfolding even as he read, and the next steps were poised to impact both their lives in ways he could barely anticipate. Harry knew, with chilling certainty, that uncovering these ambitions was only the beginning. The real challenge, understanding the full extent of the plan and his place within it, was still ahead. And as he prepared to delve even deeper into the pages, he sensed that the revelations to come would push him further, test his trust, and challenge everything he had believed about love, loyalty, and destiny. But what he discovered next would be more personal, more intimate, and more shocking than he had ever imagined. And it would force him to confront a truth that could change everything. But what he discovered next would be more personal, more intimate, and more shocking than he had ever imagined. And it would force him to confront a truth that could change everything. The wedding. To the world, it had been a fairy tale, a dazzling celebration of love and unity, a moment captured in photographs that would last forever. To Harry, it had been the culmination of hope, devotion, and a promise of shared life. And yet, as he revisited the journal, he began to see the entire spectacle in a new, unsettling light. Every smile, every carefully staged embrace, every public gesture now carried a weight he hadn't understood at the time. The wedding was no longer simply a celebration. It was, in part, a carefully orchestrated performance. The journal entries revealed a meticulous attention to detail, even in the smallest aspects of the ceremony. Meghan had recorded notes on timing, positioning, and visual impact, how each photograph should look, how gestures should be interpreted, how Harry's public image could be leveraged to enhance her own trajectory. She had considered not only how she would appear, but how he would appear, how the family would appear, and how the global audience would perceive the union. Every moment had been strategically crafted to convey warmth, unity, and devotion, while simultaneously setting the stage for her future independence. Harry felt a wave of disbelief. Could someone truly plan so much? Could the love, the joy, and the emotion he experienced have existed alongside such deliberate calculation? And yet, the clarity of the entries left little doubt. This was not an accidental oversight. It was intentional, a blending of personal celebration and strategic foresight. The fairy tale he had lived, and the one the world had adored, had layers he could never have guessed. As he turned the pages, Harry discovered more about the choreography behind the ceremony. There were notes on guest interactions, seating arrangements, and even the timing of smiles and glances. Meghan had analyzed the behavior of family members, predicting reactions and planning responses in advance. She had considered the media coverage, anticipating which moments would be captured, how they would be interpreted, and how they could be used to project the image she wanted. Harry realized that every element of the wedding, every gesture, every expression, had been part of a carefully constructed narrative designed to serve multiple purposes, some of which did not center on him at all. The journal also contained reflections on the emotional impact the wedding would have on Harry. She had considered his personality, his attachments, and his expectations. There were notes on how to manage his reactions, how to maintain his trust, and how to leverage his public persona to reinforce her own. Harry felt a pang of betrayal. Had every joyful moment, every intimate exchange, been influenced by a premeditated strategy? Or was there a genuine thread of love intertwined with the ambition? The line between authenticity and calculation blurred until he wasn't sure he could distinguish one from the other. And yet, amid the strategic planning, there were glimpses of vulnerability and personal reflection. Meghan wrote about the weight of expectations, the pressure of public scrutiny, and the desire for autonomy. She acknowledged the complexity of balancing personal desire with strategic action. Harry read passages that revealed a mind both ambitious and self-aware, a mind that recognized the implications of her choices, not just for herself, but for him, for the family, and for the world watching. The sophistication of it was both impressive and disconcerting. Audience, imagine seeing the love of your life on your wedding day, knowing that behind every gesture, every smile, every vow, there might have been a calculated intention. How would you reconcile the joy with the awareness of strategy? How would you navigate the mixture of love, admiration, and betrayal? These were the questions consuming Harry as he pored over the journal, each entry peeling back another layer of what had seemed a simple, beautiful moment. The more he read, the more he realized that the wedding was a microcosm of the larger strategy she had outlined in the early ambitions. Every aspect of the ceremony, every interaction, every image captured had been designed to establish a foundation for her future independence. The public perception of happiness, unity, and partnership was carefully curated. Harry's own role was acknowledged in the journal, but it was functional rather than central. He was an instrument, a component in a plan that extended far beyond the moment they exchanged vows. And yet, Harry couldn't deny the complexity of the emotional reality. There had been moments of genuine connection, laughter, and tenderness. Could strategy and sincerity coexist? Could love be real, even when interwoven with calculated ambition? The tension between admiration for her foresight and the sting of betrayal was almost unbearable. He felt caught in a storm of conflicting emotions, unable to fully separate joy from manipulation, intimacy from calculation. The journal entries detailed even the smallest gestures, the tilt of a head, the clasping of hands, the cadence of words spoken during vows. Each had been considered for its visual and emotional impact. Meghan had analyzed the reactions of family members, ensuring that each moment projected the intended message to both those present and the global audience. Harry felt the weight of every smile and glance he had shared during the ceremony in a new, unsettling way. The realization that these had been partially orchestrated left him reeling. And yet, there were entries that revealed a deeper understanding of the human element. Meghan had considered the emotional resonance of her actions, recognizing that sincerity, or the perception of it, was essential to executing the plan effectively. She had understood that the illusion of love, connection, and partnership was a powerful tool, one that could reinforce trust, enhance public perception, and provide the leverage necessary to achieve her long-term goals. Harry felt a mixture of awe and devastation. The intellect, foresight, and psychological acuity displayed were remarkable, but the personal cost to him was staggering. As he continued to read, Harry found passages that analyzed potential challenges, predicting scenarios in which the plan could falter. There were strategies for managing conflict, ensuring public support, and maintaining control over narrative. Every contingency had been considered, every risk accounted for. The wedding, once a symbol of love and unity, now appeared as a carefully engineered event in a broader strategy that positioned Meghan for autonomy and influence while maintaining the appearance of partnership. The emotional impact on Harry was profound. The wedding, which he had approached with hope and devotion, now revealed itself as a layered performance, a blending of ambition, foresight, and subtle manipulation. He wrestled with the duality of admiration and betrayal, recognition of genius, and the sting of personal loss. The line between authentic emotion and strategic action blurred, leaving him questioning the very nature of their relationship. And then, among the pages, he discovered an entry that made his breath catch, a note explicitly referencing him, detailing how his public image, demeanor, and emotional responses could be leveraged to maximize the impact of the wedding on her own ambitions. The words were precise, deliberate, and almost clinical. Harry felt the sting of being analyzed, measured, and strategically utilized, even in moments that had felt intimate and personal. The realization was suffocating. Audience, imagine standing at the altar, exchanging vows with someone you believe loves you wholly, only to learn later that aspects of your own behavior were part of a carefully orchestrated plan. How would you reconcile trust, affection, and the lingering shadow of strategy? How would you navigate the mix of admiration and betrayal? These were the questions haunting Harry as he continued to read, each entry unraveling more of the wedding's hidden narrative. The journal revealed a delicate balance between public performance and private intent. Meghan had crafted a narrative that projected love, devotion, and unity, while simultaneously setting the stage for autonomy, influence, and personal brand building. Every gesture, every glance, every carefully timed smile was part of a broader strategy designed to achieve goals beyond the wedding day itself. Harry could see now that the ceremony, while beautiful and meaningful, had been a calculated step in a long-term plan that he had only just begun to understand. And just as he was beginning to process the full magnitude of these revelations, a final note caught his eye, a line that suggested the wedding was only the beginning. There were hints of actions yet to be taken, strategies yet to be executed, and consequences yet to unfold. The journal promised further revelations, deeper insights, and plans that extended far beyond the celebration that had captured the world's attention. Harry closed the journal for a moment, his mind racing. The wedding, once a symbol of love and joy, now appeared as a facade layered with ambition, foresight, and calculated intention. He felt a mixture of grief, admiration, and disbelief. The clarity of her planning was undeniable, but so was the personal cost to him. And as he set the journal down, Harry realized the next discovery would be even more intimate, even more emotionally charged, and would force him to confront the reality of the life they were building together and the part he would play in it. The facade had cracked, and the truth behind the celebration was only beginning to emerge. The wedding facade had crumbled, leaving Harry in a whirlwind of shock, betrayal, and disbelief. Every smile he had shared, every whispered promise, every joyous moment suddenly carried the weight of calculated intention. The realization that his entire fairy tale had been layered with strategy rather than pure affection hit him like a physical blow. The emotional fallout was immediate, intense, and almost impossible to process. He felt as though the ground beneath him had shifted. His trust, which had once been steady and unwavering, now wavered under the weight of the revelations. Each memory of shared laughter or intimate conversation flickered in his mind, tinged with doubt. Had he ever truly known Meghan? Or had he been dancing on the surface of a carefully constructed plan he had been too naive to recognize? Harry's emotions oscillated between grief and anger, admiration and betrayal. He felt both awed by the brilliance of her foresight and devastated by the personal cost it exacted. For days, he could hardly sleep. Nights were filled with replayed conversations, scrutinized gestures, and imagined scenarios. Every interaction, both past and recent, seemed suspect. The journal's revelations had transformed his perception of reality. Even the smallest details, the way Meghan tilted her head, the timing of her laughter, the seemingly casual comments, were now loaded with potential meaning. Harry felt himself questioning not only Meghan's intentions, but also his own judgment, his own capacity to trust, and the very nature of their shared love. Friends and close confidants began to notice changes in him. He became quieter, more introspective, and sometimes visibly tense in conversation. His laughter, once easy and spontaneous, now carried a shadow of uncertainty. While he never shared the contents of the journal, the impact was evident in his behavior. He felt isolated, trapped between the desire to confront the truth and the need to protect himself from further emotional harm. Even routine interactions seemed fraught with hidden meaning, as if every gesture or word could reveal additional layers of intention he hadn't yet discovered. Harry's emotional fallout was compounded by contradictions. Publicly, Meghan continued to exhibit warmth, charm, and devotion. She played her role flawlessly, projecting a narrative of love, unity, and shared happiness. Privately, through the lens of the journal, he recognized calculated ambition, strategic foresight, and a level of manipulation that left him reeling. The juxtaposition was maddening. How could the woman he loved appear so genuinely affectionate, while simultaneously orchestrating a trajectory that might ultimately leave him behind? Harry felt as if he were living in two parallel realities, one he had always known, and another, far more complex and unsettling, that was now coming into focus. As the days passed, he became increasingly hyper-aware of subtle cues. Every word Meghan spoke, every glance, every choice of attire or timing was scrutinized. He cataloged these observations mentally, piecing together patterns, mapping out behaviors, and predicting potential moves. The journal had given him insight into her mind, but it had also heightened his vigilance, making him constantly aware that the world he thought he knew was layered with intention and strategy. Harry's thoughts often circled back to a single, haunting question. Had he been naive to believe in the simplicity of love? Could affection exist alongside calculation, ambition, and foresight? And if so, how could he discern genuine emotion from strategic intent? These questions plagued him, leaving him restless, introspective, and emotionally raw. The emotional fallout was not just about betrayal. It was about grappling with the complex interplay of love, ambition, and trust in a relationship he had once believed was straightforward and true. He found himself replaying critical moments in their relationship, their first dates, their engagement, quiet nights together, and analyzing each one in light of the journal's revelations. What had been authentic? What had been calculated? The lines blurred, leaving him in a state of constant questioning. Every memory, once comforting and cherished, now carried the potential for reinterpretation, and every emotion was tinged with doubt. The emotional impact extended beyond personal reflection. Harry's perception of the royal family, their interactions, and even the broader public narrative was also influenced by what he had discovered. He realized that the journal not only revealed Meghan's ambitions, but also provided insight into how she might navigate relationships, manage perceptions, and orchestrate influence within the family and beyond. Each revelation added complexity, deepening his sense of disorientation and challenging his understanding of loyalty, love, and partnership. And yet, amid the turmoil, Harry felt a strange mix of clarity and determination. The journal, while devastating, offered him knowledge that he could use to navigate the unfolding reality. Awareness provided a form of agency, allowing him to anticipate potential moves, assess risks, and consider responses. He realized that emotional fallout, while painful, was also a precursor to action, a necessary step in understanding the full scope of the situation and preparing for the choices he would eventually have to make. Audience, imagine being in Harry's position. How do you reconcile heartbreak with clarity, betrayal with understanding, love with calculation? How do you process revelations that challenge not just your perception of another person, but your own capacity to trust, interpret, and engage? These were the questions consuming him, leaving him both emotionally raw and intellectually alert. In the midst of his reflection, Harry noticed subtle changes in Meghan's behavior, small, almost imperceptible actions that now seemed loaded with significance. A delayed response to a question, a carefully chosen word, a pause in conversation, all became data points in a growing mental map he was constructing. The journal had shown him her plans, but real-time observation revealed the execution in motion. He began connecting dots between past entries and present actions, realizing that the ambitions outlined in the journal were not static. They were alive, evolving, and actively influencing their shared life. The emotional fallout intensified when Harry considered the implications for his own agency and identity. For years, he had viewed himself as an equal partner, someone whose voice, presence, and decisions mattered. The journal suggested a more complicated reality. While he had contributed to the narrative, the overarching trajectory had been shaped largely by her ambitions. The realization was humbling, disorienting, and painful. He wrestled with feelings of invisibility, manipulation, and loss, yet also with admiration for her foresight and intelligence. The dichotomy was emotionally exhausting. Harry's internal struggle was further complicated by his public role. He was, and always had been, under scrutiny, not just by family and friends, but by the world. Every action, every emotion, every decision carried weight beyond the private sphere. The fallout from these discoveries would not remain confined to personal reflections. They had potential ramifications for public perception, media narratives, and the broader story of their lives. The stakes were immense, and Harry felt the pressure of navigating them while processing profound personal upheaval. And then came the turning point, a realization that shook him to his core. The journal's entries had not only detailed ambitions and plans, they had revealed a philosophy, a worldview in which love, loyalty, and partnership were interwoven with strategy, foresight, and leverage. Harry understood that what he had experienced as betrayal was also a reflection of ambition, foresight, and meticulous planning. The complexity of emotion and intention was staggering. He felt both grief for what he had believed and respect for the intellect and calculation on display. Yet the grief remained, persistent and unrelenting. He questioned every memory, every gesture, every word. Could he continue to trust her? Could he reconcile the love he felt with the calculated nature of her actions? The journal had given him insight, yes, but it had also introduced a new layer of complexity, forcing him to confront the delicate balance between emotion and strategy in their relationship. And as he grappled with these questions, Harry realized that the fallout was only the beginning. The emotion